Hello, everyone. I'm Louise Keegan, and I'm the Membership Development Manager here in Learnovate. You're all very welcome to today's Link and Learn webinar on working with the Wave, how organizations can thrive in an AI-transformed world of work. Before we get into today's topic, I would like to remind you of a couple of tools to ensure this event is as inclusive and collaborative as possible. There's an option to add subtitles. Simply click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. You can also ask questions at any time in the chat on the right of your screen, and my Learnovate colleagues, as well as our speakers, are available to have a conversation. We're going to be running 2 polls today in relation to the topic, which you can view by clicking polls on the right of your screen. The first one asks how organizations use AI, and the second poll looks at what would help you get more value from AI in work. Please take the time to complete these polls, as it gives us valuable insights into your experiences with AI in the workplace. Before we kick off with our keynote, let me take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about Learnovate and what we do. Learnovate is one of 9 Enterprise Ireland technology centres. Each one focuses on a different area of expertise, with Learnovate focusing on the future of work and learning, specifically learning science, cognitive science, technology, innovation, and user experience. We are hosted by Trinity College Dublin, and as a centre, we have 2 key objectives. Number 1 is to be membership-led, and number 2 is to have research impact. All of our members have access to 15 years of multi-million euro industry-led research on the future of work and learning. Our membership continues to grow, with over 115 members in the Learnovate community from a range of schools, third-level institutions, corporates, SMEs, startups, not-for-profits, and government departments. You can check out our website for the up-to-date list of our members. We also place a huge focus on stakeholder engagement, with a busy calendar of events, including our exclusive member-only events, which are also listed on our website. Every month, we delve into what's happening in the world of work and learning, and you can keep on top of the latest trends, topics, and research through our monthly Inside Learning podcast, our Momentum newsletter, and our LinkedIn. So if you're not following us, please do so. If you're not already a Learnovate member and are interested in becoming one, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via our website or message me on LinkedIn to set up a conversation. So now on to our keynote speaker, Catherine Kearney. Catherine is an EdTech consultant, a startup advisor, and the founder of Evergreen EdTech Consulting. Catherine has leadership experience with Databricks, Google, and Amazon. She also specializes in corporate learning and workplace development, helping organizations build the skills and capabilities needed to succeed in an AI-enabled world. Catherine is a passionate advocate for AI literacy and inclusive learning, and is at the forefront of shaping the future of work. Welcome to the stage, Catherine.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, everyone. As I say, I'm delighted to be here. I want to start with a question, and I'd love you to just sit with it for a moment before answering it. If we were in a physical room together, I'd love to see hands up, but in lieu of that, think about it for now. How many of you in the last 30 days have used AI in some form of your work? Maybe it was ChatGPT, maybe Claude or Gemini, maybe something built into a tool you already use every day. Now, how many of you have a clear organizational strategy for how AI is being used, learned from, and governed across your workforce? I'm guessing there's a gap here. The gap, that reality of AI in our working lives and the strategy we have to meet it, is exactly why we're here today. Because here's the thing, the wave has already arrived. It didn't ask for permission. It didn't wait for our learning strategies to catch up or our job architecture to be redesigned. It just came. And we have a choice. We can stand on the shore wondering whether we should get in the water, or we can learn to work with the wave. That's what this talk is about. My name is Catherine Kearney. I'm the founder of Evergreen EdTech Consulting, and I've spent my career in the middle of fast-moving technology organizations at Google, Amazon, and most recently Databricks, helping them build the learning cultures and talent capabilities for their customers, partners, and internal employees that they need to keep pace with change. And I can tell you with absolute confidence, the organizations that are winning right now are not the ones who waited to figure out AI. They're the ones who started building human capability alongside it. I'd love to take this opportunity to just remind folks that AI has been around for quite some time, many years, in fact. We're all likely taking advantage of AI completing our text messages or email sentences or making recommendations on our favorite TV stream channels. I know I have. AI has been around for many years, but the reality is that it wasn't until November 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT to the world, that it got into the hands of every individual, not just technical individuals. That is what has led to what may feel like the tsunami of AI, to stay with the ocean analogy. It's the proliferation of generative AI that has made it noisier than other technologies, and it's theoretically available to everyone. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening out there in corporate learning and talent right now. We're simultaneously facing three forces that have never converged quite like this before. The first one is where skills are expiring faster than we can replace them. There's a 2025 report from the World Economic Forum, and it estimates that 39% of workers' core skills will be disrupted, likely outdated, in the next 5 years. Not eventually, not someday, in the next 5 years. And AI is the primary driver. Another data point from that same report, 60% of employers are expecting to transform their businesses by 2030. This combined is going to cause the fastest growing and the fastest declining roles. The top three fastest growing skills are all technology related. The roles that exist today are changing. The skills that good people got hired for 2 years ago are not the same skills that will keep them competitive tomorrow. The second force is that the supply chain for talent is broken. We can't hire our way out of this problem. There aren't enough people with the right skills. And even if there were, the pace of change means that by the time someone is hired and onboarded, the landscape has already shifted again. The only sustainable answer is to build from within, to develop the people you already have. I witnessed this time and again where job postings require people to have unrealistic numbers of years of experience with AI. They just don't exist. But if they do, they were probably the ones building the AI that we're all now needing to learn about. And likely they are not job hunting, likely they're being hunted. The third one is where I get the sense that most organizations are still treating learning like it's 2010. Annual training calendars, one-size-fits-all compliance programs, L&D teams fighting for budget while being asked to solve enterprise-wide capability gaps. It's not an easy job, folks. I've been in rooms where AI strategy is 5 slides in a boardroom deck, so big chunk, but the learning strategy is a web page nobody visits. So the differences are vast. The difference in those organizations is palpable. You feel it in how people talk about their work, how they face uncertainty, how they respond to change. I've been in rooms where learning is embedded into every sprint, every product launch, every strategic pivot, every organization town hall, and that makes a difference. At Databricks, most recently, like most learning teams, we needed to ensure that our value as a learning organization was recognized across the whole company. We did that by aligning with some of the most strategic company level objectives. And this is an organization of 10,000 people. For example, how do you get more revenue? That is top of mind for our CEO. The quick answer is through sales. As a learning organization, How do you train a salesperson to be impactful faster? How do they get their first sale faster? And that's through the right level, the right format, and the right content when the salesperson needs it. We were effective with that. Another example is how do you, as a learning team, ensure that a customer renews their contract with you or your organization's product? Again, organization level important metrics. You ensure that they know how to use the product through learning. Effective users of a product become your advocates and become stickier, and they churn less. So again, building that value of learning in your organization. Back to the point about some learning organizations being stuck in 2010, I know many of us experienced rapid change during COVID too, and to an extent, that change could be comparable to what's happening now. I know at Google Cloud, I was there at the time, we had a huge dependency on in-person instructor-led training. That stopped overnight. We had no choice. We needed to pivot in order to support the continued expectation that our training was directly connected to the success and the growth of our Google Cloud users. COVID, despite impacting the entire world, wasn't an acceptable excuse. We needed to change how learners got access to our training, and that meant meeting them where they were, online and in their homes. We are capable of the change needed now. We've done it before. Now, I know that when we talk about AI and the future of work, there's an anxiety in the room. There always is. People are worried about their jobs. Leaders are worried about what to tell their teams. L&D professionals are wondering if their entire curriculum needs to be rebuilt from scratch. I want to offer a reframe. AI isn't taking your workforce, it's revealing it. It's revealing which skills in your organization are genuinely human. The ones that require judgment, empathy, creativity, contextual understanding, ethical reasoning, the things that no model can replicate, because they're rooted in lived experience and human connection. And it's revealing which tasks were never really adding value in the first place. The low complexity, high volume work that was consuming your best people and leaving them underutilized and probably unfulfilled. When I was at Databricks, we were watching AI reshape the data and engineering space in real time. And what we found was the people who thrived weren't necessarily the most technical. They were the ones who could ask better questions, who could work across functions, who could take a model's output and apply human judgment to it. That's the skill set we need to be building, not AI skills in isolation, human skills amplified by AI fluency. There's a term I love, augmented intelligence. Not artificial intelligence replacing human intelligence, but human intelligence made more powerful by the tools available to it. That's the world we're building for. And the question for every person here today is, how are you preparing your people for it? So what does it actually look like to build a workforce that's ready for this? I want to share 3 shifts that I believe are non-negotiable. From event-based learning to learning in the flow of work, job-based talent to skills-based talent, and from AI as a threat to AI as a learning partner. Let me dig into each of those for a wee bit. The first one around event-based learning to learning in the flow of work. The traditional model of learning, send people to a course, run a workshop, tick a box. It's not designed for the pace of change we're now operating in. The organizations I've seen get it right are embedding learning into how work actually happens. Micro-content at the point of need, communities of practice where knowledge is shared laterally. AI-powered tools that serve up the right information at the right moment. It's not about abandoning structured learning. Don't get me wrong, there's value in that. It's about making the connective tissue between formal learning and daily work much stronger. What that could look like in practice is integrating a learning chatbot into the tools that your team members use on a regular basis every day. using natural language? Can they get the answer they need to progress with what they are doing, whether it's preparing for a sales call with a customer or preparing to have a tough conversation, perhaps a performance-related conversation with a team member? Bring it to where they are when possible. The second one is around focusing or moving away from a job-based talent to skills-based talent. This is one of the most important structural shifts happening in forward-thinking organizations right now. And it has profound implications for how you develop, deploy, and retrain your people. When you organize around jobs, you have rigid boxes. They're limited. When you organize around skills, you have a living, breathing talent marketplace. You can see where skills are concentrated and where there are gaps. You can move people into projects that stretch them. You can spot the person in the finance team who has data skills that your analytics team desperately needs. Skills-based talent management isn't just good for the organization, it's better for the individual. People feel seen for what they can do, not just the job title they were hired for. I'll tell you a story. I lived this when I was hired at and became a hiring manager at Google. Google operates a hiring policy that hire you to be successful at Google, regardless of the role that you're hired into. Now, not to assume that me, perhaps as a self-professed non-technical person, could suddenly get an engineering job at Google. That's not the case. But when hiring for something like a program manager for a particular team, is existing experience in that specific team's function would be less important than the person's suitability to Google. How that looks in practice is that you typically have 4 interviews with different people as part of the hiring process. But only one of those interviews is interviewing you about the actual job that you're applying for. The others are all more generic, looking at your cognitive ability, your cross-functional collaboration, how well you work with other teams, and then thinking about your leadership skills as well. Only one of the interviews is on the topic of role-related knowledge, how specific your knowledge is related to the job that you're applying for. So it's possible, but it definitely is a structure. The third one, when we think of AI as a threat, moving it to a learning partner. This is where AI literacy comes in, and it's something I feel very passionately about. AI literacy is not just for your tech teams. It's a baseline capability that every person in your organization needs. Not because they all need to build models or write prompts, that's not what we're saying here at all, but because they need to understand what AI can and can't do, how to critically evaluate its outputs, and how to use it responsibly. I think the responsible use of AI is really important. Specifically as a learning partner, wouldn't it be great to be able to get the precise piece of information you need when you need it? Using AI thoughtfully can empower people in that way. And here's the equity dimension that I think gets missed in a lot of these conversations, though. If you only build AI fluency in the people who already have the most access, that is typically the most senior, the most technical, the most privileged, we're accelerating inequality inside our own organizations. The most equitable and strategically smart thing you can do is to democratize AI literacy. Build it broadly, build it inclusively, and build it now. No doubt, we're all looking forward to attending the Learnovation event in Dublin on the 8th of October. The theme of that conference this year is human skills that power the AI world. And I love that framing because I think it captures something essential. But I want to be clear about what it means in practice. Putting the human at the center doesn't mean slowing down adoption. It doesn't mean being cautious to the point of paralysis. It doesn't mean treating AI as something to be managed or feared. It does mean designing everything that includes your learning strategy, your talent architecture, your performance frameworks, your technology investments, with the human experience at the core. It means asking not just, what can AI do efficiently, but what does this mean for the people doing the work? It means involving employees in the change, not doing it to them. That's an awful feeling. It means creating psychological safety about learning, failing, and adapting. I practice what I preach during my time at Databricks and at Google around building psychological safety, where we held retrospective sessions. Some call them postmortems. I err on the side of a more positive term here. So I call them retrospectives. This gave the team members involved in a program or a pilot a chance to reflect on the highs and the lows of a project. It was entirely blameless and was intended to share learnings with everyone, regardless of title or level of accountability during the project. When seen as a learning event, it's less scary. And it means refusing to accept that progress has to come at the cost of inclusion. I want to close with something that I genuinely believe. In 10 years, we look back at this moment, right now, 2026, as the inflection point. The moment when organizations either chose to invest in their people alongside AI or chose to invest in AI instead of their people. And the ones who chose people will have won. Back to the World Economic Forum report I mentioned earlier, 85% of employers surveyed plan to prioritize upskilling their workforce, and 50% plan on transitioning staff from declining roles to growing roles. This is great news. And not because AI isn't powerful, it's extraordinarily powerful, but because the organizations that combine that power with genuinely human, capable, motivated, continuously developing humans will be in a different league entirely. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this presentation today, it's this. The most powerful investment you can make right now is in the humans at the heart of your organization, not instead of AI, alongside it. Because the future of work isn't human or machine, it's human and machine, working better together than either could alone. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Catherine. That was great. I love the idea of the people who thrive will ask better questions. It's so relevant in so many ways. Now we're going to move on to our panel discussion. Our chair today is one of Learnovate's corporate learning researchers, Frank O'Reilly, and he will be chatting alongside my colleagues Janet Benson and Ilse White, and we also have Catherine, who is going to come back and participate in the panel. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions as well in the chat. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to have you with us today. Delighted to be chatting to the panel after a really interesting keynote from Catherine. And just following on from what Catherine was presenting, it was quite a compelling vision of the future of work. And I'd just like to start off by asking, from your different perspectives, what do you believe is the single biggest opportunity AI presents for organizations today? I'll maybe start with you, Janet, yeah?
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Yeah, I suppose from a Learnovate perspective, what we're seeing is, you know, and kind of to reiterate what Catherine was talking about, is the opportunity for employees and organizations to focus on, inverted commas, the real work, so the human-centric, you know, value-added work, while maybe letting the AI take the more, I suppose, mundane or routine tasks that are less value-add, so sort of the donkey work, as it were, you know. And just, I suppose, to give an example of that, I was at a conference recently, which was, I suppose, not anti-AI, but definitely, you know, wasn't jumping on, like, say, an AI bandwagon, but a speaker addressed the kind of fact that, you know, and this particular context was student teachers, that they're using AI to do those admin activities or the very simple tasks, versus, you know, using it to do anything that involves any kind of pedagogical decision making or anything that's, you know, more important. So I think that's kind of reiterating the point that AI can do the simpler, sort of more day-to-day admin type things, with, you know, allowing the employees and organizations to focus on the important stuff.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that, Janet. What's your take on it, Ilse?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm going back to something that Catherine was sharing in her presentation about leveraging AI as a partner. I think that's a real opportunity to really use AI in your day-to-day work as a partner to improve and to really enhance and make your professional practice easier and better. And like we see examples of that in Learnovate as well, both in the education world, but also in the corporate learning world. So as an example, in the education world, we see that teachers and school leaders, for example, are already using AI to help with really powerful professional practice around professionalization of learning or differentiated learning for students with like learning special learning needs and just to be able to make that learning more personal. And we see it as well in a corporate world in our through our AI coaching research, where like Janet was saying, we see that coaches are using AI for administrative tasks like scheduling sessions, but also for more advanced purposes than administrative purposes, even though that's already very valuable. There are coaches who are using data from coaching conversations or using AI to analyze those coaching conversations. And what AI can do is pick up on behavioral patterns of coachees that a human coach, that are very helpful for ongoing coaching conversations, but that a human coach necessarily wouldn't pick up. So they're using it as that partner. So I think it has the potential to really improve professional practice if you use it as a partner, professional partner.
Thanks, Ilse. What are your thoughts, Catherine?
Yeah, I love what Janet and Ilse just said. I think just to build on what was already mentioned around, closing the gap between what people are capable of and what they're actually been asked to do for a really long time. We've all had brilliant people on our team. They're spending so much of their time on kind of the low complexity, high volume work that AI does really well. And so thinking about how to redirect that talent towards that kind of genuinely human related skills like judgment, creativity and connection. If you think about what can our people do now that they couldn't before, rather than what can we automate. I think the biggest thing here is less of a technology opportunity, but more it's kind of more of the human potential opportunity that I'd think organizations have the power here for.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Catherine. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into the topic. Yeah. So I'll continue with you, Catherine, and just kind of mine, your background and years of experience, because you've worked with organizations like Google, Amazon, Databricks, as you said, and across that experience, what's the biggest mindset shift that leaders need to take if they want to thrive in this, new and AI-enabled world?
Yeah, I think it's a case, and I had the privilege of seeing it certainly at Databricks most recently, and Google and Amazon before that. But thinking about learning not just as an event, but really integrating it as part of the whole organization's operating model. That needs to start at the top. And so as a learning leader, we have a lot of work to do, thinking about how you get your C-suite into being able to talk about the value of learning. And I suppose even before that, getting them to believe the value of learning. They won't talk about it until they believe it. So thinking about, rather than thinking previously about we'll send our people to a course when things change, but rather thinking about, building organizations where learning is continuous, it's embedded, it's expected. And that builds, becomes part of the whole culture. And it really is important to get senior leadership on board with that. As a people manager and as a leader, you have to change your mentality from managing outputs to really thinking about how you develop your people. And that isn't a compromise, but it definitely is a change. And I think where I saw that being done is when leaders actually showcase a role model that they're learning themselves, really thinking about and being vocal about what they're learning, what they're trying out, perhaps even where they're failing in some cases, so that people feel that it becomes normal to be learning, to be trying things, to experiment and to grow from there. I think that allows people to feel like they have permission to do the same.
And you also spoke in your presentation, Catherine, about AI as a collaborator rather than a competitor.
Yeah.
What does that look like in practice, and where have you seen organizations getting that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a front row seat when I was at Databricks. We're watching AI reshape the data and engineering space in real time. The people who thrived weren't the ones who knew the most about AI. They were the ones who knew how to work with it. An example of that is where they take a model's output, apply their human judgment, push back on it, refine it, and turn it into something genuinely valuable. I think one of the things that organizations are doing right is where they stop treating AI tools as something separate from work and started treating it or integrating it into the workflow. So really thinking about how AI is embedded at the time when decisions are being made, not making the decisions, but informing them. And I think that's a really important thing to do, whether you're creating content, whether you're solving for customer problems, really using it to inform those decisions. And that again helps build that psychological safety, allows people to experiment and fail, because that's how fluency gets built. You keep trying it, you keep getting it right. Sometimes you get it wrong, but you keep building that fluency.
And what, following off of that, what one piece of advice would you give to leaders who are feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the pace of change in AI?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'd say is don't wait until you think you understand everything before you start. Don't try and boil the ocean. A lot of people feel so overwhelmed. I think somebody used that word earlier, paralyzed by kind of the amount of AI, the amount of noise that's out there right now. I think, a very direct message, pick one workflow, one team, one problem, and just try something. I think, the learnings that you and your team will get from a small experiment in your own context is worth, any amount of thinking about it. Or reading reports or doing all the research. Do something that has your context will make that land even better. And I think rather than, as I say, boiling the ocean, start with a glass of water.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Catherine. I might go to you next, Janet. Yeah. Because your work focuses on learning strategy, workforce capability. But I want to explore, going beyond technical AI skills. What human capabilities do you think organizations should be investing in today?
Great question. Yeah, look, I think anyone who's here at the Lincoln Learn today will be very focused, I'd imagine, on transversal skills, or what we often refer to as 21st century skills. So I think these, from what we're looking at our research and the work we're doing, these are the kinds of skills that are a real focus for organizations at the moment. So these are the kinds of skills that can move with an employee, from role to role, but then also to, from organization to organization. So we're looking at the kind of skills such as, problem solving, communication, collaboration, and definitely critical thinking. I think, when we're looking to bring in technical skills around technology such as AI, it's even more important to develop these kind of transversal, or particularly the critical thinking skills, because we know that much of what's being generated by AI can be incorrect, or just misleading. And we're looking at things like AI hallucinations. So it's even more important, I think, in today's world of work, to kind of develop those human-centric skills and to have that human element in the picture, and definitely look at some of that kind of critical thinking and problem-solving type skills. I would say definitely.
And flowing on from that, Janet, I think many organizations are struggling to figure out where to start. So what should leadership teams focus on over the next 6 to 12 months? What would you recommend, and maybe why? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one because, I suppose there's an awful lot of discussion at the moment around skills gaps and upskilling in organizations and skills gaps across lots of different types of industries and workforces. And it's something we've been looking at in Learnovate in relation to our ECTA project, which is in a specific sector around upskilling. But what we found actually in relation to that, doing some research in that project, is that, I think the thing is not to kind of focus on a jump to upskilling, right? And then assuming that all your employees are lacking certain important skills and just jumping on the upskilling bandwagon. I think it's really important to start with a skills gap analysis to identify if the skills you need are actually already in your organization, because we find there's a lot of untapped talent there, and organizations think that they don't have the skills, but actually if they were to do a proper skills gap analysis of their employees, they might find that the talent and skills are already within their organization. So I think, as I said, one of the things we've been seeing is that untapped potential, and it's not all about upskilling, but being able to kind of accurately identify where the skills are and then where they're lacking. So I think, I suppose what I recommend, Frank, as a good starting point would be to find out where your current employees currently are. And that's through that skills gap analysis. And there are lots of different ways you could do that. So you can start with like self-reported questionnaires, the learning management system records you already have, qualifications of your employees, and really it's just basically, kind of tapping into all the information that you already have access to in your organization to identify where the talent is, where the skills are, and where the skills are lacking. So you're not spending a lot of time upskilling where maybe you don't need to be investing a huge amount in upskilling because the talent's already there.
Yeah, really interesting, Janet. And finally, maybe in this section, Catherine spoke about learning in the flow, in her presentation.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, are you seeing organizations, shift away from that traditional kind of, as Catherine called it, event-based learning programs towards that more continuous embedded learning strategy?
Definitely. One thing is it can be quite challenging for organizations to do that, especially, my background would have been in very compliance sort of regulated industry where training has to be completed, mandatory training, regulatory and compliance training. So those organizations find it a bit more difficult to do that training in the flow of work. But I think some of these kinds of organizations and many other organizations are moving to kind of pivot away from development of like lengthy courses, or as Catherine mentioned, event-based training, and are kind of more focused on the smaller, more bespoke and kind of personalized content. I'm sure people on the webinar today would have heard the concept of, resources versus courses. So again, looking at resources that can be made available to employees, and then, looking at things like micro-credentials. So that's something that organizations are looking at because of just the nature of micro-credentialing and the flexibility, allowing learners to kind of pick and choose what learning is best suited to them and what can really help with their skills gaps, and making that more personalized approach. And I think what you can do with that kind of those smaller, more bespoke pieces of learning are to be able to build a portfolio that an employee can take with them from role to role, so, or even to a new organization. So I think that's something that's definitely valued by both individuals within an organization, that they can engage in this learning and have these qualifications that they can bring with them. But it's also valuable for the organization because it allows, I suppose, the L&D team to focus on the learning that is most valuable to the organization and it is matched to the kind of business strategy. So L&D can focus on those types of learnings that are very valuable, while allowing employees to engage in kind of smaller pieces of learning that are specific to them. So I think that's kind of some what we're looking at the moment. The resources versus courses kind of approach.
Thanks a million, Janet. Ilse, let's get your perspective on it, because your research approach primarily explores how people learn at work, and if AI is changing the way we work, how does learning need to evolve?
Yeah, and I think that's a question that that L&D organizations have been pondering for quite some time. It's not something new, and I think there is a bit of churn and kind of breaking out of the kind of same cycle of the event and the program-led approach. We're even repeating it here multiple times. So I think that's very much the reality of where L&D organizations are at. But I think I think AI doesn't change how people learn itself, or the changes that are driven by AI or COVID. It doesn't change how people learn. It's still around like getting experiences, to applying it in work, to practice things, to receive feedback on your performance, to reflect on how things have been going, and like the social element and interaction with others and learning from and with each other. I think what AI and Catherine mentioned it earlier as well, I think COVID changed is that it's the environment in which the learning happens, right? And we need to meet learners there as L&D organizations. You're facing a situation where knowledge becomes outdated quickly, where skills expire, and where really people need to increasingly just rely on skills that they can just learn in the moment, in the job, as they're doing those jobs, rather than, you train up before you start doing a job. Like, I think that model and that approach it's just gone. And then, like, for me then, the question is not just like, how do we use AI in learning or for learning, but more like, how is it changing the role of L&D, and what do L&D organizations need to shift? So again, what needs to happen to make that shift? And it's a really difficult shift, because there's decades of experience in doing something one way, and all of a sudden that's thrown completely on its head, and you need to move. And organizations recognize that they need to do that, but it's very difficult. Yeah, but it needs to happen. And I think there's always an opportunity in this as well. I think it's a way for L&D to become more strategic and to kind of shift from providers of learning content to supporters of capability development. And if we can make that shift, then that would be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, you've kind of gone some way to answer the question I was going to ask there about, given that different context that you've laid out, what do L&D teams need to change about how they do things?
Yeah, again, it's I don't think the role of L&D will be less important. I think a lot of organizations need to lift the strategic importance of their learning teams and the work that they do. And it's about like getting the structures and the supports in place to develop those capabilities. And that, like, I think you need to make a couple of really important shifts there. The first one is mentioned a lot of times already, and that capability it's not developed by a one-off course. People will need opportunities to practice and to experiment and to receive coaching, which is something that needs to be supported by L&D organizations, by their teams as well, by colleagues, and people need to know how to do that. I think one way of getting there is by making learning more social. Like, it's L&D should support creating the conditions for people to learn from each other and to share experiences, to learn with each other. That's the second kind of shift. And then I think something else, like AI itself obviously will become part of the learning ecosystem, or should become part of that. And it can be really helpful. And Janet alluded to that as well, by helping us provide just-in-time guidance, by creating that personalization, by providing coaching, feedback, reflection, all of that good stuff. And that can happen in the flow of work. That can happen while people are learning. And I think the other thing is that you need to start at the beginning. Is, what do you want to achieve with your learning, or with your building your capabilities? What are the organizational goals that need to be met, and how do you measure that? Like, how do you measure how a skill or a capability is developing over time? And how do you know it is contributing to the success of your organization? So starting at that point, and it's a shift from measuring impact of learning. It goes beyond that, and it's measuring the cognitive kind of development of your workforce in a way. So yeah, I think L&D organizations have an opportunity to kind of rethink that and shift their value. It is a change process. It's not easy, and it needs to start small to demonstrate its success. But I think that if L&D teams will focus and shift their focus on building that capability support in the whole organization and trying to guide that change, then there will be a function that will be very central to everything that's happening in the organization.
Well, thanks a million for that, Elsa. Okay, I'd like to broaden out the discussion a little bit, maybe, because we've talked about skills, learning, technology, but I want to talk about culture and how it often determines what succeeds or fails in an organization. and I want to examine in particular the role that leadership plays in creating the right culture where people feel confident in experimenting with AI and not to use your analogy, Catherine, not standing on the beach waiting for the perfect wave. Yeah. So I might I'll maybe come back to you first, Ilse, and just get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I do think leaders play a really important role there. Like it is their role to lead change in the organizations and to move people. But I think it's important that they look at it not as a technology problem, but as a people problem. It's not about learning how to use all these AI tools. It's learning and leading on how the people that are in your teams, how they use it. And I think it's very, very easy to say that, it's very important. Leadership needs to come up with a clear strategy and get everybody on board with that. But ultimately, and it is important, but ultimately, those leaders need to be supported as well. And I think this is a situation where they need to learn as much as the people in their team, and they need to learn alongside each other and find ways to experiment collectively and share their learnings. And then so it requires a very kind of flexible leadership approach, I think, where a leader is as part of the learning process as everybody else.
I agree with that, Ilse. I could jump in there just to say, I think, it's about providing people with opportunities to fail fast and learn, and to learn, as we know, learning happens really well through failure. So allowing people to experiment and fail and learn from that is really useful. And I think allowing that experimentation and then also, that knowledge sharing within the organization, it can kind of help develop some of those use cases and, that organizations can use, but also a knowledge base that everyone can learn and benefit from, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that a little bit, agree with everything you folks just said. Thinking about, a lot of organizations have, something flashy on the wall about their mission or their culture, but it really comes down to what individual employees see their leadership modeling. So again, back to that role model behavior. One of the things that it tends to kill AI experimentation, but even before AI, other types of experimentation in your organization, is that experimentation, piloting, any kind of activity like that is really great for learning, that those mistakes made might be career limiting. I think that's a really important thing for leadership to kind of dismantle. Thinking about their own learning curve. I touched on it earlier, being vocal about, I tried this, it didn't work, but here's what I learned. I think having those kind of very clear conversations, not being shy about it as someone who's being watched within the organization, you need to be, I suppose, showing that level of experimentation yourself. And thinking about as well, I suppose you need to make space for individuals for this experimentation. Like, it can't be on top of their full workload. It needs to be integrated into their workload, and kind of being explicit about that exploration within your job as opposed to a distraction from it. I think that's a really important competitive advantage, that people should feel safe within their kind of daily work. And that typically comes from what they see their senior leadership doing.
And just to come back to a point you made in your presentation, Catherine, about the risk of the unequal adoption of AI within an organization leading to, inequalities of career opportunities effectively. Because I think lots of people would be aware that, certain companies with certain, budgets, they can have a competitive advantage over other companies, but people are less aware of what can be happening internally within a company where there's an inequalities emerging. So how do organizations ensure that AI adoption is inclusive and that everyone is brought along with, that upskilling and that adoption of AI?
Yeah, I think, a lot of organizations tend to focus on kind of the typical suspects. They provide AI training to the most technical, the most senior, typically the most folks who are already advantaged in some way, especially around AI. I think that default path has to change, and it just, as you said, Frank, creates that, widens the gap within organizations. And I think, a budget is a really important one, where that budget for training or learning gets distributed, I think is a really important one to help with that. But a couple of things that I think are really important around inclusively adopting AI around your organization. And it can feel a little bit kind of against the grain. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's okay. That's what we should all be doing right now. But it does mean doing things like running an audit for your tools and your training, asking your team members honestly, kind of if what you think is happening in your organization is actually happening. It also means thinking about AI literacy programs. Just to be honest with you folks, I think there's an assumption also that technical people are suddenly, AI literate. That's not the case, in fact. There's also a study that I got access to from a peer of mine who works in a large organization, and she did a survey that she was surprised by, that some of the newer people to the workforce, the default assumption was that they would be more AI literate than perhaps the more mature of us. That wasn't the case in what she found. So just debunk any of the myths that you might have or assumptions that you might have by asking the right questions. But really thinking about your AI literacy programs. It also, we're seeing that a lot of folks kind of at the front line, closest to your customers, are typically going to be the ones that gain most from AI. But they tend to be, in many cases, the last to get access to it. So again, making time in their learning, in their day, to make sure that they're getting awareness and upskill there. And then thinking about kind of the value that this brings to your overall organization. This does come down to, I think it was Ilse said earlier, around the change management. Like the technical skills, yes, we can all teach something technical to people. Some people pick it up straight away, or some people take it a bit longer. But I think the change management that AI being so prolific right now is really bringing into the conversation is really important. And I think it makes our workforce a productive and resilient. And I think that's how we'll help with kind of this tendency of inequality within your organization. So a couple of things there that I hope I shared that folks will be like, oh, that's something that I can think about. But yeah, I think it's a really important one, because we're just creating that bigger gap if we're not thoughtful about it.
Yeah,
Janet, what are your thoughts?
I was going to add, thanks, Frank. I was just going to say, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, in general, if an organization is implementing an AI tool or any technology, I suppose to ensure it's fully inclusive, it has to be available to all employees, really, which can be challenging. But I think what you need to do is put those guidelines in place to ensure there's a shared understanding of what the tool is to be used for and then what's not to be used for. So I think guidelines kind of help, employees feel more confident in what they're doing and that they're not doing anything wrong, inverted commas. So I think that definitely helps with being a lot more inclusive, that it's kind of open to everyone.
Yeah, and I would add to that and say that, those guidelines should be developed in collaboration with employees or whoever. Like you can't assume that everybody will just pick it up after they have get access and do a training on AI literacy. I think it's important for organizations to meet people where they're at, because ultimately you'll want your strategy to be supported by everybody in your organization. So you need to make sure that everybody can kind of get lifted up to that level. So yeah, going back to that, it's a people challenge.
Okay, that's been a really interesting discussion, guys. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to bring us back to close the discussion, and I'm going to ask each of you if you could give us a one-liner in terms of, what do you think, is the one takeaway people should have from what we've been talking about? I'll go to you first, Catherine, maybe.
Yeah, I think Ilse touched on it earlier. And I think we want to, make sure that people are asking the right questions. So, do an AI literacy audit, question what's going on in your organization as soon as you can, before you build out your strategy, before you buy another tool. And I know everybody has, sales folks knocking on your door saying, I have the best tool, please use it. Before you launch another training program, find out what's actually happening. Ask your people, what are they using? What are they not using? Why aren't they using it? It'll probably amaze you kind of the answers that come out, and some of them might be a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. If truly you're going to make a change and make a sustainable change, I think you have to get to the root of what is happening in your organization. I think Ilse mentioned earlier as well around using AI responsibly. If folks don't know what they can use and how to use it responsibly, quite often, and you hear these anecdotal stories all the time, that people are going out to their own personal kind of ChatGPT or equivalent and putting sensitive company information that ends up into training models publicly. That's not a place you want your private business information. And so, without some kind of governance, some kind of control, I think you need to be very mindful of what people are doing, even without permission. So do that audit, and kind of you'll see the return on the opportunity there. I think audit first, then act.
Thanks, Catherine. Ilse, what would be your one-liner?
Yeah, I think it's if you do act, like for leadership to give permission to try and to experiment, and for everybody to share what they're doing with each other. If you can communicate that and discuss that, that will be a good start or follow up.
I like that one, Ilse. And Janet, what's your one-liner?
Yeah, I agree with Ilse 100%. Seeing what works in another organization with a similar context is invaluable. So I think learning what works and what didn't. And also, I'd also say, just look, don't always feel like you're being left behind if you're not already using AI all the time in your business. With any new tool or approach, it's important to identify how and why you're going to use something before adopting it and figuring that out later. So I think, organizations just need to be more proactive and less reactive. We know that can be a challenge, but I think that's something that organizations really should be aware of.
Thank you so much, all three, for a very interesting and stimulating discussion. And I'll hand back to Louise to maybe finish things off. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That was fantastic. Just to remind you all that we have recorded this and we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel. So if you want to take a look back at the discussion, at the presentation, thank you so much, Catherine. And there's lots of other content on our YouTube channel. And one last thing, our Learnovation early bird tickets are closing on the 31st of July. So if you would like to avail of that price, then hurry up and get your tickets. And thank you to everybody today, and thank you for showing up. Have a good day.